imagine if I was an 18-year-old that I just detransitioned and I was already feeling vulnerable and suicidal. Imagine then if I read this message.
You're not going to believe this. A child protection activist from the UK says he received death threats all the way from Canada, but from who? It appears to be a freelance writer for the CBC. Dre Humphrey here with Rebel News, and my oh my, is it just me? Or is this clown world we're living in spinning just a little too fast? Depending on your news source, it's like we live in two different parallel worlds. If you watch the CBC, for example, you might think that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's all these people who just hate drag queens coming out to be bigots, so much so that laws need to pass now, like in Calgary, where it's illegal to peacefully protest a drag queen story time because difference of opinions, I guess, are violence now. Instead of the actual violence. I mean, like when Pastor Derek Reimer was thrown to the ground protesting a drag queen story time in that city. Billboard Chris was assaulted multiple times by trans activists, while this officer, Constable Frederick Buckman, thought it was hilarious, even failed to rush forward to help him, and if you've seen our report on this, she even blames him for it, for wearing his signs peacefully. But that's why we have this petition you see at the bottom here, firebuckman.com. You can quickly go to that even on another device and share that, please, if you haven't already. I'm going to personally hand that to the VPD because that's outrageous. But what I'm getting at here is, depending on your media source, you know two different versions of what's happening. We bring you the other side of the story. We have no strings attached with the government. We're completely independent, so you can see things like you're seeing right now. When I say the LGBTQ plus religious zealots, I don't mean people who are just part of the LGBTQ community. I mean the ones like this, which include Antifa, like you're seeing on the screen here, doing extreme things under their name. But if you follow the state broadcasters or state-preferred news like the CBC, you're only going to get a taste that makes you think, like, out of nowhere, all of a sudden, all these people just hate drag queens, which wouldn't even make sense. But maybe that's why Carmen Acuna thought she could get away with this sadistic message that she sent Oli London. He calls it death threats. I call it more trying to convince Oli to kill himself. But as soon as he posted about it on Twitter, she deleted it, and she also took the CBC link out of her bio that shows that she has in fact written for them.
I did get a response back from CBC's Public Affairs Department. They say they are aware of the disturbing tweet, and although Acuna is not an employee, she is a freelance writer, they will be forwarding it to their programming department.
If you're not familiar with Oli London, I recently interviewed him, and I'll link that below, where he tells everybody his recent detransitioning story after finding God. But today is a very different story, one that's frightening, shocking, and embarrassing to be happening in Canada from a journalist or, like I said, a freelance writer. Here is Oli.
Well, yeah, so firstly, in the last few months since I detransitioned, I've been subjected to daily death threats from, trans activists, woke warriors, these people that preach about inclusivity and kindness. But last night, I don't really check my direct messages because, I get so many things, and I try to cut out the negative. Last night, as I was going through my Instagram DMs, I received the most horrific message, and I thought, let me click on it, see what this person is ranting about, see what they're saying. This person said that I should be taken to a warehouse to be tortured. I deserve to have a very horrible death, and that the whole world and the media should relish in my torture and death. And it was a very long message, and it was very direct, and it very much seemed like this person almost had an intent to carry out this, I never normally share these messages because I think, I don't like to give oxygen to such nasty, horrible people. I don't believe in that. But this instance was so shocking because what I discovered afterwards was this particular individual is actually a contributor for CBC Canada, which, as we all know, is a state media in Canada, under Justin Trudeau's state government. So I was appalled. And, when I looked at this person's, they had an article on CBC, they were listed as a freelance contributor. And it was funny because this whole article was about suicide prevention, about, how to help look at the warning signs, how to prevent suicide. And here was this person, this freelance contributor for CBC News, sending me the most horrific death threats. So, firstly, what a hypocrite. You're writing about suicide, preaching about all of this, and then you're secretly sending death threats. But, it was absolutely appalling. And, I posted on Twitter and I tagged them. I tagged CBC, I tagged the president because, it's obviously they didn't know what their contributor was saying behind the scenes, but they need to know because this person should never again be writing for Canadian state media when they are wishing the most horrific torture and death on someone.
And you're right. I read that article. The hypocrisy is not lost on me. It seems like she, at least from the age of 11 to 18, was a very hurting person. And here she is trying to hurt you. I would call it sort of a message to try and entice you to become suicidal, which is what she's writing about, her overcoming here in a certain way here and coming out of cutting and stuff. I'm just going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to read a couple of the lines here because I find it just awfully sadistic what was written here. It begins with, I literally hope you effing die. You are a piece of crap with nothing left in your life. So you target marginalized groups and shed an awful and disgusting light on the existence of Asian and trans communities. Now, I follow you closely on what you do online. You're very focused on child protection issues in the realm of, the harms that come to people or children when it comes to medically transitioning them. And she goes on here to call you just such horrible names here. And then accuses you of doing something to Filipino people, which I couldn't quite understand. What do you think she's getting at there?
Well, yeah, firstly, so a lot of people know me. I do K-pop music. I have a lot of Filipino followers. So I do TikTok videos where I'm talking their language, where I'm trying to learn. So, it's related to their culture. And this particular individual, like you said, completely sadistic. And thankfully, I'm a tough guy. Been through a lot in my life. I'm a super tough guy. I can handle this. But you know what, Drea? Imagine if I was an 18-year-old that I just detransitioned and I was already feeling vulnerable and suicidal. Imagine then if I read this message. As a teenager that receives this could generally take their lives. We see so many people from online bullying receive this, and I was just absolutely appalled. This person is also a filmmaker at a school in Winnipeg as well.
Yes.
And I just think, what kind of person should be firstly writing articles for CBC Canada? Secondly, you claim to be a filmmaker, which, filmmakers is about trying to help and tell people stories. So, how are you going to tell someone's stories when you're so hateful? And, it just made me think we've seen so much increased violence from trans activists recently. We saw Nashville, which, Nashville police said is likely motivated by gender ideology. We do need to see the manifesto with that. We saw just very recently in Colorado, a transgender individual was just arrested for plotting to commit a massacre at a school and local churches. Yeah. So we see this increased violence. So, when I saw this, I thought, maybe this person's generally going to carry out an attack on me or someone else because they're so incredibly hateful. So, unfortunately in Canada, it's almost as bad as communist China in terms of the way the government treats these people. They actually protect the trans activists. If you're a trans activist, you can scream at women, you can send them abuse, you can violently assault them. We saw Billboard Chris, children's activist, violently attacked while the police laughed at him. They laughed at him while he was being beaten, and then they said that he instigated. So, no, we're dealing with a government that is akin to communist China. And, unfortunately in Canada, they just side with these trans activists. So I think, it's outrageous. And if this was any other country, if this person was sending me these threats in the UK, I know they would be, arrested immediately and charged.
I know you guys have been looking at us in shock and awe. We're living in it here. We've of reports on Chris Elston in general in the past. It's not the first time he's been assaulted. His arm was actually broken in Canada, in Montreal, just for peacefully standing on the street with his signs. We hear a lot of things in Canada, and I know it's happening elsewhere, but it's the words. The words need new laws to protect the LGBTQ community. And really, it's the activists in that community, because as you know, the LGBTQ community agrees with us in a lot of areas and agrees with the activists as well. But in Canada, we're actually seeing laws actually change to silence words. And you're right. The real thing that's happening here, the real hate, the real violence is often coming from these activists from the left. And it is quite concerning. I'm glad that there is a huge distance between you and Winnipeg from this person. She is 18 years old, so I don't want to go too hard on her. Her brain's not fully developed, but I have reached out to CBC as well. I haven't heard back from them yet about this, but I would think at the very least, this is not someone who is suitable for journalism and communicating the public if they are, in fact, of course, sending messages like this to you. Thanks so much for being on Rebel News, and stay safe.
Thank you, Joy. I appreciate it. God bless you.
If you believe that an officer who thinks it's hilarious to watch trans activists beat a man for peacefully protesting, then go to our petition at fireofficerbuckman.com. Please sign it and share it so I can hand it to the VPD and so that they know we're watching and waiting for them to do the right thing. That's fireofficerbuckman.com.